Yeah, so this is part two of our study of Revelation, chapter 13. Hopefully, we can finish this chapter in this video. Beginning with verse 11, it says, "And I beheld another beast." Remember that in the first half, or in the last video, in which we studied the first half of chapter 13, so that was verses 1 to 10. We studied about the first beast, a leopard-like beast that also had some characteristics of a lion and a bear that came up out of the sea. So this is the second beast. It says, "And I beheld." To behold is just to see, basically, to look, to see something with your eyes. "Another beast coming up out of the earth." See, this beast comes up out of the earth, and I've said many times, I explained many times that in prophecy, when we read about water or the sea, he's talking about a heavily populated area. So the leopard-like beast, excuse me, the leopard-like beast came out of the sea. So the sea represents a heavily populated area, and that being Europe. Okay, so it's talking about the papacy, which took on the characteristics of the three previous kingdoms. So, but this beast comes up out of the earth. So the earth is the opposite of the sea. Okay, it's an area that is sparsely populated, and this beast says he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So many times you hear people say the lamb-like beast, referring to, and this is obviously talking about America, and I'll show you why we believe he's talking about America, but we often say lamb-like beast, but actually it's not lamb-like. It says it had two horns like a lamb. So typically in paintings or drawings, it's depicted as a bison, or sometimes as a lamb. So perhaps, yes, it could be a lamb, but it doesn't say it's a lamb. It just says it had two horns like a lamb. Okay. But he spake as a dragon. Now, a lot of Americans have an issue with, anyone who preaches and says that, like, especially if you say that America started speaking as a dragon from the beginning, when America was occupied by Europeans and became what we know as the United States of America. They'll say they take offense to America being said to have been like evil from the beginning. They always speak about America speaking as a dragon in the future. But my personal view is that America has been speaking as a dragon from the beginning. For instance, if you look at all the treaties that they signed with the native Indians, and then they went on to renege on those treaties, and they killed many millions of Indians. Sorry, I would say America has been speaking as a dragon from the beginning, not just now, especially now that America is going around invading other countries. Some will say, "Oh yeah, America is now speaking as a dragon," or they'll think that the speaking of America is to do with the laws that it introduces in America, because we know that a kingdom speaks through legislation, okay, which is true. But what about the legislation or the treaties that, not so much legislation, but the treaties that America signed with the native Indians, which they didn't keep to those treaties? They went on to kill many Indians. Let's just maybe also cover the issue of, it said that America was not heavily populated when the Europeans went over there, when especially the Europeans were fleeing persecution in Europe. That's partly true. America wasn't as populated as Europe, which is where the papacy came up, as we saw in the first half of chapter 13. But there were many millions of Indians on the continent of America, and many of them were slaughtered. Okay, so this is a fact. It's a historical fact that America has been killing people from the time it became a nation that we know as the United States of America or as America. Okay, verse 12, and he exercises. Let's talk about America. Exercises all, not some. It exercises all the power of the first beast before him. Which beast is this? Which is the first beast? The first beast that's mentioned between verses 1 to 10 of chapter 13, the papacy. So, in order for the papacy um, to hide itself so that it doesn't take the blame for what's all the suffering that is being caused on the earth, they are giving America the power to exercise, exercise the power of the first beast. So the papacy gives. So remember, we read that. Let's just go there now. We read that in Revelation chapter 13, verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. The lion is Babylon, the bear is Medo-Persia, and the dragon is Satan. Okay, gave him his power and his seat and great authority. The dragon gave the papacy, this leopard-like beast, his power, seat, and great authority. But then what does the papacy do? The papacy gives power to the second beast, which is America, so that it can exercise all the power of the first beast, which is the papacy. And what does America do with this power? It causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. The first beast gives power to the second beast, and America causes the world to worship the first beast, the papacy, whose deadly wound was healed. Remember, we dealt with the deadly wound being healed in 1929 when Mussolini was a British agent. Okay, he was trained by MI5, I think MI5 or MI6, in the same way that the Ayatollahs in Iran basically are British puppets or puppets of the West. So Mussolini, anyway, what I was saying, Mussolini signed an agreement with the papacy in which he handed over the Vatican to the papacy. Okay, and that resulted in the healing of the wound. The deadly wound. What was the deadly wound? The deadly wound, I covered that last time, was when the Pope was arrested in 1798, when Napoleon sent his general to arrest him. Okay. So America causes the world to worship the papacy, which is the first beast. Let me just read this here. It says, at the time when the papacy, robbed of its strength, was forced to desist from persecution, this is in 1798, John beheld a new power coming up to echo the dragon's voice and carry forward the same cruel and blasphemous work. America. This power, the lust that is to wage war against the church and the law of God, is represented by a beast with lamb-like horns. The two horns, like a lamb, will represent its two fundamental principles, republicanism and Protestantism. So, if you ask anyone, what is this? And I've actually presented this before, by the way, this PowerPoint. I prepared this PowerPoint in 2021, I think, and I've actually presented this in a church in Harare. When I asked what statue is this, everyone said it's the Statue of Liberty. That's what we know it as. Okay, remember this. If you remember, there's a doctrine for the goyim, or for the outsiders, and then there's the doctrine of those who are in the inner circle. So we often refer to this as the Statue of Liberty. And before I go on, let me just explain that the Statue of Liberty was actually constructed in France, and it was donated to America by French Freemasons. Okay, so just going back to the name, they'll say this is the Statue of Liberty. But if it's a Statue of Liberty, why does it have the 7 rays of the sun on its head? This is Mithra. This is the god Mithra. Of course, in the religion of Mithraism is practiced in Iran, predominantly in Iran, is to do with sun worship. Okay, so who is this? Okay, who is represented by this statue? Um, it's this is actually Lucifer. Okay, uh, and why am I saying it should actually we should actually be referring to this as a statue of Lucifer? And why is that? Because Lucifer is the light bearer. The name Lucifer means the light bearer, or some will say the shining one. Okay, that's one of the reasons why Lucifer became proud, because he's very beautiful and he's very bright. Okay, but he's the light bearer. So here, the so-called Statue of Liberty is bearing a torch, which is light. Okay, and the seven rays of the sun represent sun worship. Why sun worship? Because Lucifer, as the light bearer, chose the brightest object in our sky to represent him, and that brightest object is the sun, and that's why most Christians worship him on Sunday, the day of the sun. The day he chose that day to represent him, whereas God chose the Sabbath, which we commonly call Saturday, to represent him. And if you look at the word Sabbath, it has the word Abba in the middle of it, meaning it's the day, it's God's day. Okay. So yeah, quite a significant thing, because if anytime you ask someone what is this, or say Statue of Liberty, which they know to be in America, it's kind of a good representation of America. So the name Statue of Liberty is very nice sounding. It sounds very good, but when you dig deeper, you find that actually this is all to do with Lucifer. Okay, in the same way that it says that here that America has two horns like a lamb, but he speaks as a dragon. So America appears to be good and innocent. They say some very American governments say some very nice things, and they claim to represent good. But when you look at their actions, they tell a different story, which is what I'm going to do in this video. I'll show you some of the things that perhaps are not really taught in the public school system about the things that America has done and is continuing to do. I've already covered the issue of the fact that America slaughtered many millions of Native Americans. Let's read verse 13. And he doeth, this is still talking about America, he doeth great wonders. Remember that in the Bible, countries are referred to as he, not she. We nowadays we refer to countries as she, but that is not so in God's word. Okay, he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. So great wonders, this is talking about false miracles, and this is actually going to be repeated, I think, even in the next verse. Yeah, these are false miracles. Okay, but the fire that's been spoken of here, is it literal fire or is it symbolic? Perhaps it's both. There are some who have said that this fire, America does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven. Some have said that this fire is referring to, when the planes went into the Twin Towers on 9/11. First there were explosions, and then the towers came down. There are some who say that that's what this is referring to. Come down from heaven. Remember how tall the Twin Towers were on the earth in the sight of men. 9/11 happened in broad daylight. Perhaps that's what this is referring to, but it can also be referring, is basically, just look at it as false miracles. Okay. Verse 14. Sorry, just going back to this, if you just on the issue of 9/11, of course 9/11 was an inside job. I have to mention that, especially for those maybe who are watching my videos for the first time and you never heard me saying that 9/11 was an inside job. It was done by the American government itself, and of course the American government went on to investigate itself and found that it was foreign agents who had done 9/11. In fact, I don't know how many of you know this, but George Bush Jr., who was president at the time, was actually reluctant to investigate 9/11. He only investigated it after a lot of pressure had been put on the American government. But of course, the whole investigation was a whitewash, along with many other major events that have happened in the US. For instance, with the JFK assassination, that was just so-called investigation was a whitewash. That was done. The JFK assassination was done by the CIA, especially and agents who were hired by the CIA. And even some of the men who were involved in the assassination, their names are known. I can't remember some of their names right now, but I know. If I'm to go back to my documents and if I have time to think, I actually know some of the men who were involved in the assassination. For instance, even what's his name? Jack Ruby, whose full name was Jacob Rubinstein. Jack Ruby was actually had a part to play in the assassination. And Lee Harvey Oswald was just a patsy. Lee Harvey Oswald actually just said himself that he was a patsy. Okay, so but yeah, that's maybe as an aside, that America does a lot of things to itself. For instance, with 9/11, they conducted 9/11 through the CIA, and also the Mossad was actually heavily involved in that as well. And then they used the FBI to cover up the crime. I actually have a video which I've actually shared on one of my videos, where it shows dumpster trucks, going to ground zero after the towers had come down. These dumpster trucks were going in convoy, showing that the whole thing was planned way before 9/11, and they went there and basically removed all the rubble and all the metal. And in fact, an interesting fact to know is that the metal that came from the Twin Towers, when those two towers were actually demolished, because there were actually bombs in the towers which brought the towers down, the metal was sent to China for recycling. So that's another point that just shows you that China and Russia don't hate each other. But I think I've proved that in many of my videos. They're all working together. Okay. So going on to verse 14, still speaking of America, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. Okay. Remember I said that the issue of miracles is going to be repeated. These are false miracles. It's basically another word for false miracles in some of today's language that we use is false flag attacks. Okay. It's where a false flag attack is where a country or some kind of institution attacks itself, and then they blame someone else for the attack. For instance, with 9/11, America did that to themselves. It was an inside job, and then they blamed Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda for the attacks, and said that they had hijacked planes and flown them into buildings, including the Pentagon. Okay. In fact, an interesting fact is that two planes were flown into buildings. Now, there are some who say that there were no planes. I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about what's commonly believed to have happened on 9/11 is that two planes flew into two buildings, into the Twin Towers. But there were actually three buildings that came down. The third building was a building called Building Number 7. Okay, most people don't even know that. Okay. But America deceives them which dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. So the beast that's been spoken about here, I believe, is the first beast. Okay, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. So America convinces the world to think and behave a certain way. For instance, even with this pandemic was actually being run by the Department of Defense in America. So America convinces, and of course, why I call it a scamdemic, because it was a scam. There was nothing. There was no virus. There was nothing. Okay, it was all just driven by propaganda on TV. America convinces the way to behave, to think and behave a certain way, including this thing that they will make an image to the beast. The beast being referred to is the papacy. Okay, the papacy, the first beast that's mentioned in chapter 13. So what is the image to the beast? Let's ask this question: What is the papacy? Well, the papacy is a combination of church and state. That's why when you look at the flag of the papacy, you find that there are two colors: they're white and yellow, and also there are two keys on the flag, which represent spiritual and temporal power. So America will make an image to the beast. An image is something that you see when you look in the mirror. Okay, so America will become like the papacy in that they will bring church and state together. Right now, as we speak, or as I'm making this video, church and state are separate in America, but church and state will come together. That is the image to the beast, okay? Will become like the papacy. Because what is the result of church and state coming together? Normally, the result is persecution, okay? Persecution against those, against the dissenters, who don't agree. For instance, especially if they start introducing religious laws, for instance, if they say that everyone needs to keep Sunday when Sunday is not biblical, we have never been told to keep Sunday in the Bible. There's no verse that says we should keep Sunday. I've already showed you that Sunday is to do with sun worship, which is actually represented by the Statue of Liberty. There's the formation of the image to the beast is going to result in religious persecution. So the verse ends by saying the beast, okay, the first beast, which is the papacy, it had a wound by the sword and did live. I think this has now been stated about 3 times in chapter 13. The wound is what happened in 1798 when the Pope was arrested, but the papacy didn't die because the Pope was arrested, because of course if one Pope gets arrested and then dies in exile, like what happened in 1798, someone else just took over. And of course, the papacy continues to live, but they're under the control of the Jesuits, and the Jesuits took over the papacy or the Catholic Church in 1814. So in addressing the issue of deception, I just wanted to share a bit more information about how America deceives the whole world, okay? See here, with regards to war, America basically, there are 3 city-states in the world. We have the Vatican, which controls all religions around the world. We have the City of London, which is where banking is based, and then we have the military-industrial complex, which is based in Washington, D.C. So the military-industrial complex is the military arm of the Vatican. So the military-industrial complex, which was also involved in the assassination of JFK, is being used basically to fight wars on behalf of the papacy. Remember that the papacy gave power to America to fight for America to fight on behalf of the papacy, so that the papacy wouldn't get the blame. In the same way that Satan gives a power and seat and great authority to the papacy, so that everyone will look at the papacy and not realize that the papacy is working on behalf of Satan. So in terms of the wars that are being fought by America through the military-industrial complex, we have a book here called The Art of War, which they say was written by Sun Tzu. Okay, Sun Tzu. They said Sun Tzu was a Chinese general. But at the time that this book was written, it says here 1772, excuse me, Lorenzo Ricci, or some will say Ricky, but I prefer to say Ricci. Lorenzo Ricci was the 18th superior general of the Society of Jesus, commonly called the Jesuits, and it's believed that not necessarily that he wrote this book, but a Jesuit by the name of Joseph Marie Amiot is the one who wrote this book, not Sun Tzu. It's believed that a Jesuit by this name here wrote this book and said that it was written by Sun Tzu. So what is The Art of War? The Art of War is basically a book with lots of military strategies, okay? But when you understand that the book was written by Marie Amiot under the how do you say, not supervision, that's not the word I'm looking for, with the with the go ahead of Lorenzo Ricci. You understand that the Art of War is actually a Jesuit war manual, okay? It says here, all warfare, this is one of the principles of war, according to the Jesuits. And I would say, I think in the whole book, this is probably the most important principle. It says all warfare is based on deception. So when here America is going around, fighting wars on behalf of the papacy, and they will basically invade other countries based on deception, as we see here. All warfare is based on deception. So right now we have this war with Iran. At the moment, it's a ceasefire, but the whole war is based on deception. Okay, the Iranians themselves are not innocent. They're actually involved in everything that's going on. Okay. It says, hence, because all warfare is based on deception, hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. Okay, it's all deception. Okay, appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Yeah. And most of these wars are fought against Protestants. Okay, get the Protestants to fight themselves, whilst you sit back and watch, basically. So with regards to the Declaration of Independence, which is, Americans often speak about like it's a virtuous document, very similar in importance to, or very close in importance to the Constitution. Okay, listen to what is said here about the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is basically where Americans declared their independence from the British government. The Declaration of Independence is an accurate transcript of the Catholic mind. This is what someone called Alfred O'Reilly said. Okay, it's an accurate transcript of the Catholic mind. This is the Declaration of Independence is actually a Catholic document. It was signed by many Catholics. Okay. Why would they do that? Well, actually, Catholics were suppressed in America before America declared its independence from Britain. They were not allowed to hold public office, and even they were not allowed to worship freely in America. But when this document was signed, and then America started fighting for independence from Britain, after America became so-called independent, Catholics were now allowed to hold office in America, and we've since had many Catholic presidents, not just JFK. There have been many Catholic presidents, but many of them were closet Catholics. We've had many congressmen, congresswomen, including Nancy Pelosi, John Boehner, and many others who have been Catholic. But before, they were not allowed. But after independence, Catholics were allowed to worship freely in America. Okay, that's one of the reasons why this happened. Okay, and with regards to the issue of independence, whether America is really independent from Britain, I've read many books that say that America is still a colony of Britain. Okay, let's move on. For instance, this is more proof of this issue that America is actually a British colony. If you look at the flag that was used by the British East India Company, for those who don't know anything about this company was a Jesuit-owned company, which was also run by Freemasons. This company was involved in shipping, but they were involved in drug trafficking, and they used to carry cotton and other commodities on their ships. This was their flag. Okay, these red lines with the Union Jack in the corner. But after so-called American independence, the flag that was adopted by the Americans was the same flag that was used by the British East India Company. The only thing they changed was, I think it started off with 13 stars that were formed a circle, but now they have 50 stars in there. Perhaps maybe now they have 51 states because Puerto Rico is considered a 51st state. But this is actually the same flag. Okay, this is a British flag. And in fact, there's a story that's told. I think it's in a book called Our Flag. Might be by George. Don't quote me, but the book is definitely called Our Flag. But I think written by someone Robinson, Robert. I forget his name, but yeah, in that book it says that it tells the story of an American when the British were fighting the Americans, and they saw the Americans. There's a soldier or soldiers who saw Americans raising this flag on a flagpole after they adopted it as their flag, and the British soldiers thought that the Americans had surrendered because they were now using a British flag. Okay, so the point is, this is a British flag. So what are the other deceptions? We read about deception here, about how America deceives the whole world. The other major deception was the sinking of the Titanic. The Titanic was actually sunk purposely, and it's actually said that this ship that actually sunk was actually swapped with a ship called the Britannic, if I remember correctly. There were three ships. There was Olympic, Britannic, and Titanic. The Britannic was damaged and was swapped and had the name Titanic on it, and then it was sunk. So that J.P. Morgan, who owned the White Star Line, the company that made the ships, so that he could claim insurance. Okay, in the same way that Larry Silverstein claimed insurance after the Twin Towers came down. He'd only bought the Twin Towers a few months before. But knowing that they were going to get demolished. Okay, in the same way the Titanic was sunk purposely. Why would the Titanic be sunk, resulting in the loss of so many lives? Why would they sink it purposely? Well, because the richest people in the world were on the Titanic. They were actually coaxed to go onto the Titanic, and the three richest people at the time were John Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, and the other one is Guggenheim. I can't remember his first name now, but they all sank when the Titanic went down. And remember that men were told that they cannot board the lifeboats. It was women and children who were told that they can board the lifeboats in order to be saved as the Titanic was sinking. And I've actually I read, I think it was in a YouTube comment of a video where the sinking of the Titanic was being discussed. Someone said that there was a witness who said that there were actually gunshots that were heard as the ship was sinking. But yeah, very important thing to remember is that there are many facts actually about the Titanic which I can't discuss right now in this video because it will take too long. But yeah, what's his name? J.P. Morgan owned the company that made the Titanic and the other ships as well, the Britannic and the I think Olympia or Olympic. He wasn't on the ship. He was supposed to be on there, but then he decided not to board the Titanic, along with his friends as well, who were supposed to be on the Titanic. They didn't go on there. And there was also a Jesuit priest from Ireland, the Jesuit provincial from Ireland, who took many photos. I think his name was Francis Brown. And the captain of the ship, Edward Smith, had actually sailed through this part of the Atlantic on many, many occasions. I think he had been a captain for 26 years, and he knew this area very well. But on the night that the Titanic sunk, there are some say that there were actually bombs at the Titanic as well. I don't know, but the story that's commonly told of the Titanic is that it struck an iceberg. But Edward Smith was actually going too fast. He should have known. In fact, he had many warnings to slow down from other ships as well. But yeah, this was sunk purposely to destroy all those who were opposing the setting up of a Federal Reserve in America, especially the rich Americans who opposed the setting up of a Federal Reserve, which is a private bank in America. They were all killed so that the Federal Reserve could be set up, so that the funds from the Federal Reserve could be used to then fight all these wars that are being fought right now. Let's move on. Another deception was the sinking of the Lusitania, which had Americans on board and was sunk by Germans because this ship was actually carrying a lot of guns and ammunition, and Americans had been warned not to get involved or not to supply ammunition and bombs and guns to the countries that were already fighting in World War II. World War One. And it said that what's his name? Winston Churchill was somehow involved in this incident because he was what are they called? He was in the Navy. I forget what position he had, but he was in Winston Churchill was in the Navy at the time. He was actually involved in this whole thing. So this was a deception. Anyway, you can read more about it in a book called The Secret Terrorist by Bill Hughes, which you can download as a PDF. This incident happened so that this ship would be sunk with Americans on board, so that Americans would get angry and get involved in World War One. That's what this was about. The attacks on Pearl Harbor, the Americans had put the Japanese on an oil embargo, and then the Americans have provoked the Japanese into attacking them. And it's interesting that the Pearl Harbor is basically in Hawaii or near Hawaii, and the Americans even moved some of their oldest ships to that area, knowing that the Japanese would attack. Because at Pearl Harbor is not very far from Japan. Okay, so the Japanese attacked. Pearl Harbor because it's under the control of the American government, trying to cause them hurt. But the Americans knew that the Japanese were coming because, of course, the Americans had radar, isn't it? And in fact, I've read that there are even some submarines that were sunk in the area near Pearl Harbor, so that the Americans knew that the Japanese were coming because they'd provoked them by putting them on an oil embargo, so they knew all this was going to happen. And if you look at the Second World War, listen to what Anthony C. Sutton says. And Anthony C. Sutton wrote these two books, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Of course, the Bolsheviks, the communists that took over in Russia and removed the Romanov family. The Romanovs were the royal family in Russia. Excuse me, they were removed by the Bolsheviks, who were communists. The money for the Bolshevik Revolution came from Wall Street, or from Americans, okay? And then he wrote another book called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. Hitler was supported financially by Americans, okay? Listen to what he says here. When the Allied troops successfully invaded France near the end of World War II, they discovered that they had something in common with their German enemies, Ford and General Motors, vehicles running on gasoline provided by Standard Oil. Standard Oil was a company that was started by the Rockefellers. Later on it was split into different companies because of American laws which prohibited monopolies. For instance, we had ExxonMobil. It came out of Standard Oil. Okay, so it says the Germans and both the Germans and Americans had something in common. Ford and General Motors vehicles running on gasoline provided by Standard Oil. So yeah, there was a man called General Butler who wrote a book called War is a Racket, and General Butler he was a general in the American military. He said, when he says that war is a racket, he says basically the war is a scam and it's a business. Okay, war. Remember, all warfare is based on deception. So you can see two countries fighting each other, but actually they're actually on the same side. And war is actually used for the purposes of depopulation as well. So moving on to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, they say that this ship here that's shown in the picture was attacked. An American ship was attacked by the Vietnamese in the Gulf of Tonkin, but that actually never happened. It never happened. It was a lie. It was a way of getting Americans to get involved in the war in Vietnam, because normally Americans, nowadays perhaps things have changed, but in the past Americans never used to want to get involved in foreign wars. In fact, there was a president called President Monroe in America. He wrote a document called the Monroe Doctrine, in which he said Americans would not get involved in foreign wars. But in order to get Americans to go along with all these wars, they always create these deceptions, commonly known as false flag events, where they'll say that they've been attacked when it's actually either nothing has happened, such as in the Gulf of Tonkin, or they've attacked themselves, like what happened on 9/11. So as a result of this, Americans ended up in Vietnam. And of course, JFK had said he didn't want to get involved in that war, and that's one of the reasons why they assassinated him. We have the Oklahoma City bombing, where they'll say that Timothy McVeigh and his friend, so the person that's normally named is Timothy McVeigh. He said that he drove a truck that was full of bombs, which then exploded and caused all this damage here, killing hundreds of people, including babies, because there was a daycare center here. This is called the Mara building. I think this building was demolished afterwards. There was a daycare center here. In fact, there were also FBI agents who had offices in this building, and the FBI agents who had babies in the daycare center, their babies never went to the daycare that day, and the agents themselves never went to work. So Timothy McVeigh, who was formerly in the military in the US, was blamed for that, but of course he was just a patsy. And I think he was executed by lethal injection, if I remember correctly. So a patsy, just like Lee Harvey Oswald. So another deception. Waco. So the best documentaries to watch on the Waco massacre are Waco, Rules of Engagement, and Waco, A New Revelation. So what happened in the Waco massacre? So this man, David Koresh, and David Koresh was not his real name. I think his name was Vernon Jones or something like that. He led a group of Christians who had split from the Seventh-day Adventists. They were known as Branch Davidians, and they built this compound in a place called Waco. That's where this name comes from, Waco, which is in Texas. But unfortunately, David Koresh and the Branch Davidians were set up by it was initially by the ATF, and ATF stands for Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, but it's the full name for that government agency is BATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, and they set him up. Basically, the funding for the ATF was being cut, and this was during the days when Bill Clinton was president. So because the funding for the ATF was being cut, they decided to go and raid the Branch Davidians to make, basically, how can I say this, to justify the existence of the ATF so that the ATF would continue to get funding from the government. So they went and attacked the Branch Davidians, but the Branch Davidians actually fought back because they had guns, and some ATF agents were killed. And I think there were 4 ATF agents who were killed, who all 4 of them, there may be others who were injured or killed, but I remember these 4, that there were at least 4 agents that were killed, and all 4 were formerly Bill Clinton's bodyguards. So it's suspected that what actually happened is that these 4 ATF agents were killed by their own men. They were killed by ATF agents, because if you look at some of the footage from these documentaries, you see that some of these agents were actually shot in the back after they entered the building, because there's a part of the building where they climbed up with ladders, and then as they went into one of the windows, after going in, there were actually ATF agents who were shooting into that same window where the ATF agents had gone in. So it's suspected that these four agents who were formerly Bill Clinton's bodyguards had maybe seen too much, and they had to be executed. But part of the reason why the Branch Davidians were attacked was because the ATF, the funding for the ATF was being cut, and they wanted to justify their existence. So After that, there was then a siege which happened. I think this happened in April 1993, if I remember correctly. The anniversary for Waco came up in April, just a few months ago. There was then a siege that happened for several days, where the FBI basically surrounded the compound and were torturing those inside. There were some, I think, who were allowed to leave, but they were then arrested and charged with certain crimes. But those who were left inside were tortured by having loud music being played at night and the sounds of rabbits being tortured and things like that. And there were even helicopters that flew around the compound, and they were even shooting at Branch Davidians. Some Branch Davidians were actually killed. There was one who actually managed to come out of there, and he then told about everything that happened during that siege. And eventually, FBI basically went to war with the Branch Davidians, and there were Branch Davidians who were actually shot as they were trying to defend themselves as tanks were going in, destroying the compound. Because remember, the Branch Davidians had guns, okay? And in fact, they say that there were so many lies told about David Koresh. They said that there was a warrant for his arrest or something, but he was resisting being arrested. But David Koresh used to go out jogging, and he used to drive out to Texas, to the town in Waco, many times. He was never arrested, but after this incident, they said that he was claiming to be God, and he was molesting children and sleeping with the wives of the other men in the compound. Most of which is lies. Okay, he may not have been a saint, but there were definitely lots of lies that were told about him. So I was talking about how the FBI went in and massacred all the Branch Davidians. There was basically a war that the FBI fought with the Branch Davidians, and the skeletons of some of the Branch Davidians in the documentaries. If you watch this document, you'll find that some of them had bullet holes in their skulls where FBI snipers had shot at them through the windows here, because the Branch Davidians were trying to defend themselves since they had guns. But eventually there was a tank that went in and with a flamethrower on the end of it and set the whole place on fire. And the FBI even put bombs. There was a shelter, like a bomb shelter, which was in the grounds of the compound. The FBI put bombs on top of that bomb shelter and blew all the survivors in there, blew them up and killed them. And then after this whole place burnt down, the FBI went in with tanks and other vehicles and destroyed all the evidence. But you can watch all that in these documentaries. I won't say any more about that. So that was another deception. And the one of the things that happened after Waco was that President Clinton was said that this incident in Waco was a warning to everyone not to join small groups, small Christian groups. Okay. So basically, President Clinton was saying that everyone should stay in their big churches, even though knowing full well that those churches have been infiltrated by Roman Catholic Jesuits. Okay. What an odd thing to say after innocent women and children and men have been killed. So also in 1993, which is the same year as the Waco massacre, there was an attack at the Twin Towers where a vehicle with explosives was placed in the basement of one of the Twin Towers, and it blew up and caused a lot of damage. But those men who had placed that vehicle there were actually, through investigation, it found that they had been trained by the FBI. They were FBI agents, excuse me. But of course, they will always say that it's terrorists. But when you dig, you find that the so-called terrorists are trained by the CIA or the FBI. And then 9/11 itself, I think I've already said a lot about 9/11, but these are called squibs, okay? They show that there were bombs going off before the Twin Towers came down. Lots of evidence of the Twin Towers coming down being a controlled demolition. They were brought down through a controlled demolition. And of course, if there were bombs in the Twin Towers, which they were, it means that there had been an operation which had been ongoing for many days for the bombs to be placed in the Twin Towers. There are many things that have been said about the Twin Towers, about why they needed to come down. They were full of asbestos as well. And of course, 9/11 was used as a pretext for America to go and attack other countries, starting with Afghanistan, and then afterwards it was Iraq. And then we have those 7 countries which were named by General Wesley, which Iran is the final country that was named on the list. Of course, we had Sudan and Syria and Libya. 7 of them. I might have forgotten some of them, but yeah. With regards to 9/11, we have architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth who say that there's no such thing as tall buildings coming down because planes have hit them. The buildings were actually built to take the impact of planes. And as you can see here, I don't know if you can see that, but that's actually building 7. That's the 3rd building that came down on 9/11, and it wasn't hit by a plane. So we had 2 planes that allegedly went into buildings, but there were 3 buildings that came down. And we have here Major General Albert Stubblebine, who said, "I saw a missile hitting the Pentagon," because with the Pentagon being one of the most heavily protected buildings in the world, no one has ever seen the footage of a plane going into it. But this general here, or the former general, says he saw a missile hitting the Pentagon, which makes no sense. He says not a plane. All of the sensors were turned off that day. One apparently did not turn off, and it shows this object hits the Pentagon, and it did not look like an airplane. At each floor, successive puffs of smoke are seen, which are called squibs, and he's referring to the Twin Towers. These are called squibs, okay, puffs of smoke, which show that there were bombs there. They are due to controlled demolitions. The collapse of the Twin Towers were caused by a controlled demolition. This is a former general. I don't know if he's still alive now, but yeah. We also have pilots for 9/11 Truth who say that some of the maneuvers that are alleged to have happened, for instance, the so-called alleged plane that's said to have gone into the Pentagon, that maneuver cannot even have been done by an experienced pilot, let alone someone who has experience, who was learning to fly, because they say that the hijackers who took over the planes were only just learning to fly. And then we have here that awkward moment when a BBC reports the demolition of the World Trade Center building number 7, which I said wasn't hit by a plane, 26 minutes before it actually happens. So this reporter live on television said that this building had come down when it was still standing, knowing that they knew, the BBC knew that this was all a planned operation. Then here we have 2 Jesuit priests with FBI agents at Ground Zero. This is where the Twin Towers used to be. I refer to this as Jesuits basically admiring their handiwork. So this is General Wesley Sacco I referred to earlier. He said about 10 days after 9/11, I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. One of the generals called me in. He said, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "Why?" He said, "I don't know." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connected to Saddam?" And we're talking about Saddam Hussein, to Al Qaeda. He said, "No, there's nothing new that way." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I remember they said that Osama bin Laden, who is the one that's supposed to have conducted the whole operation to attack America on 9/11, they said that he did the whole thing from a cave. If you believe that, you believe anything. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that. We are going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran, which is the war that we're having happening right now in 2026 with Iran." So who was Wesley Clark? Is a former general and former head of NATO and Allied commander during the Kosovan War. And this was an interview that was done on channel called Democracy Now! On the 2nd of March 2007. He seems to have turned and is told the truth about what was really going on. Because normally those who are high up in positions like generals, they don't normally come out and tell the truth. So these are some of the U.S. interventions since World War II, and I won't go through all of them. I've already been talking now for nearly an hour. You can just stop the video and have a look at that. There's also okay, no, I've got rid of that. I actually had another slide that showed countries that have been bombed by the US, but there are some of the countries are some of the ones that I mentioned here. So here we have the Trinity of World Control. These are the three city-states that I already referred to. We have the Vatican, which controls religion. City of London controls finance or banking. Washington, D.C. controls the military-industrial complex. All three are separate states, completely independent of their respective countries. So this is just a picture from Alberto Rivera's one of Alberto Rivera's comics, in which he said that when you see an American president being inaugurated facing the Washington Monument, it was a sign that all churches had been infiltrated. Okay, I won't read this because of time. Then we've got back to the book of Revelation, verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak. Remember, I said that the image of the beast is church and state, a combination of church and state, in a similar way that the Vatican is church and state. So in America, we're going to have church and state. And what will this church and state do, or this image of the beast? It will speak. And how does a country speak? It speaks through its laws, okay, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So those who would not obey the American government when it's now church and state as one will be killed. In other words, those who would not obey the laws that are passed after America comes together as forms the image of the beast. It says that they should be killed, but normally it doesn't start with dissenters being killed. It's normally things like fines and imprisonment, and eventually being those who dissent end up being killed. Verse 16, and he causes all, both small and great. This is still talking about America. Okay, America causes all, not some, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. This is basically when it talks about the great and the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the bond. It's talking about everyone to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. What mark is this? Listen to what this is one perhaps opinion or belief about what the mark is. There's someone called H.F. Thomas, Chancellor of Cardinal Gibbons, who said in 1895, of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change from Sabbath to Sunday was an act, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters. So I'm trying to address the issue of the mark. What is the mark? It says here the mark is the mark of the Catholic Church's ecclesiastical power, which is the change of the Sabbath to Sunday. So there are some who believe that Sunday is the mark of the beast. That, in other words, the mark is not a physical mark. It's symbolic of something else, which some say is Sunday. And of course, we know that ultimately the agenda behind climate change is to introduce Sunday laws worldwide, because the Sunday is the mark of the Catholic Church. Remember, the Sunday is the day that the devil or Satan has picked to represent him, because the sun is the shining one, the biggest shining object in the sky, whereas the name Lucifer also means the shining one or the light bearer. And also from the Catholic record, it says, "Your Sunday is our mark of authority. The church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. This is from the Catholic record, September 1, 1923. And John Paul II said, "A person who violates the sanctity of Sunday is to be punished as a heretic." To me, this shows that definitely there is an agenda to get everyone to respect or to rest, or respect Sunday, or to rest on Sunday, or to keep Sunday holy. And this is from the Detroit News, July 7, 1998, so not that long ago. And then we had Benedict XVI. He said the EU must keep Sundays, says Catholic Church. I don't know if you can see that, if you can read that, but it says here Pope Benedict XVI advocates the revival of Sunday worship in Europe. Verse 17, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark. Now, am I saying that the only understanding of what the mark is Sunday? I'm just presenting what some say, especially Adventists believe that Sunday is the mark, of the beast. And you have the Catholic Church saying that themselves. But it's because from experience, we know that things don't happen exactly as we expect. Can the mark be something else as well? I know that the mark, Sunday laws are definitely going to be introduced in the future, but can the mark be something else? Potentially, yes. Or can the mark be more, the mark of the beast, can it be more than just Sunday? Yes, definitely, because in order to enforce the mark of the beast, remember, this is talking about the issue of buying and selling, it's talking about money, We're going to have other things that are going to be used to try and enforce Sundays, and one of those things is CBDC, central bank digital currencies. So verse 17 says, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. In the future, no one will be able to buy or sell unless he has the mark. The mark, some say, is a physical mark, some say it's a chip. We shall see exactly when it happens, but or to only be those who have the name of the beast or the number of his name who will be allowed to buy and sell. What is the number? What is the name of the beast or the number of his name? Here I've just referenced Matthew 21 verses 12 to 13, where I said that Jesus was crucified, where it says Jesus was crucified after throwing out those who were buying and selling from the temple. And with CBDCs being prepared to be used all over the world, once everything is digitized, we won't be able to access any of these things that are listed here on the chart. Things like healthcare, banking, food and sustainability, travel, mobility, humanitarian response, e-commerce, social platforms. So you have I think this is the old symbol for Twitter, but also other social media platforms. You won't be able to access them unless you have the mark, or unless you use digital currencies. We have e-government, telecommunications, and smart cities. That's why we have this push for digital IDs. For instance, even in the UK, after the British public rejected digital IDs and they marched and protested, King Charles still came out a few weeks ago and said that he has instructed his ministers in the UK to go ahead with digital ID. Why? Because this is basically prophesied that it's going to happen. So the mark is not just about Sunday. Sometimes I think there's too much focus on, there are some who say that the mark of the beast is Sunday and it's Sunday only. No, but how is it going to be enforced? Even if it's Sunday, how is it going to be enforced? And it might be more than just Sunday. These things, it can't just be one thing. There are many things that will be used basically to force the whole world to worship the beast, the papacy. We have a quote here from Henry Kissinger from 1973, where he said, "Who controls the food supply controls the people." And right now we are seeing the destruction of the food supply chain with the lack of fertilizer which comes through the Strait of Hormuz. He said, who controls the energy can control whole continents. Who controls the money can control the world. So they'll control the money through, already the money is controlled, but at the moment they can't really control how we use it because it's in the form of paper money. But when CBDCs come in, it will be programmable and controllable. And this Bishop Sorondo said that China is the best implementer of Catholic social doctrine. So if you want to know how exactly the world is going to be controlled, you look at what's happening in China, where we have such apps as WeChat, which are being used to control the Chinese. And in fact, Elon Musk has said that he wants X to eventually become similar to WeChat, so that it can be used for financial transactions and other things. So yeah, the controls are coming through various ways. Okay. You can read that in your own time, or just stop for a few seconds so you can read that. Saying a similar thing to what Bishop Sorondo said about China. And the World Economic Forum has said, you own nothing and you'll be happy. And I think the aim for this is 2030, similar to Agenda 2030, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And here we have Catherine Austin Fitz, who said, slavery is the most profitable business in the history of the world. It is more profitable than mining, more profitable than narcotics, which is drugs. It is more profitable than all the addictions. Globalists now have the capability of implementing slavery, and their attitude is, let's do it. And of course, in Revelation chapter 18, we read in verse 13 that Babylon and the merchants of the world, they trade in all these things that are written down here, but also in slaves and the souls of men. This is similar to what Catherine Austin Fitz is saying here, saying slavery is the most profitable business in the history of the world. So with regards to digital currencies, it said the Bank of England tells ministers to intervene on digital currency programming. So digital currencies will be programmable. This is from June 2021. JP Morgan, who is the one that owned the White Star Line ship that built the Titanic and the other big ships, he says gold is money, everything else is credit. So all these things that we call money, such as printed paper and digital currencies, they are not real money. Gold is real money. Okay. These three companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, are the three richest companies in the world, three richest investment companies in the world. Verse 18, here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600, threescore and six. Threescore is 60, okay, a score is 20, so threescore will be 60, so here we have 600 and 60 and 6, so 666. And we have a verse from 1 Kings 10, verse 14, which says, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 600, threescore and six, similar to what it said here, is talents of gold, okay. It appears that this number, 666, is also has some connection to money, okay. Now, is the number of the beast, it is the number of a man. What is this number? What it says here, what are the letters supposed to be in the Pope's crown, and what do they signify, if anything? The letters inscribed in the Pope's mitre are these, Vicarius Filii Dei. In other words, this is one of the titles of the Pope, Vicarius Filii Dei. This is Latin for Vicar of the Son of God. Catholics hold that the Church, which is a visible society, must have a visible head. Christ, before his ascension into heaven, appointed Saint Peter to act as his representatives, according to the Catholic Church. Upon the death of Peter, the man who succeeded to the office of Peter as Bishop of Rome was recognized as the head of the Church. Hence, to the Bishop of Rome, as head of the Church, was given the title Vicar of Christ. Of course, this title, Vicarius Filii Dei, is denied by the Catholic Church. They'll say this is not one of the titles of the Pope, and I'll show you why they deny this. And all this is from the Sunday Visitor. Okay, it's from this newspaper. It's just been blown up here to make it more easy to read. So with regards to this verse, which I read earlier, verse 18, speaking of this number 666, it says here, the title of the Pope in Rome is Vicarius Filii Dei. This is inscribed on his mitre. And if you take the letters of his title, which represent Latin numerals, and add them together, they come to 666. So these letters here in the title Vicarius Filii Dei, when you add them together, like in Roman numerals, if you add these letters together as you would, if you add them as Roman numerals, they come up to 666. And this is the mitre of the Pope, which was being spoken about. And if you see here, it says Vicarius Filii Dei. When you add these letters together, they come up to the number 666. You can see here how these letters can also have numerical value. Okay, some of them don't have any value, but yeah, you can stop the video and look at that in your own time. But these numbers, the numbers from these letters come up to 666. This is the Babylonian solar seal with 36 constellations. You can also stop the video and have a look at that in your own time. So all this is to do with nature worship, okay? Because constellations refers to the stars and things like that. It's all to do with sun worship. Catholicism is all to do with sun worship, okay? And the biggest sundial in the world is in St. Peter's Basilica. And even this obelisk was actually stolen from Egypt, is right in the center of the biggest sundial in the world. This is to do with sun worship. Yeah, this is to do with Bill Clinton's favorite professor at Georgetown University, who was Carroll Quigley, who wrote the book Tragedy and Hope. He says the only people in the world, it seems, who believe in the conspiracy theory of history are those of us who have studied it, while Franklin D. Roosevelt might have exaggerated when he said nothing happens in politics by accident. If it happens, it was planned that way. This was Carroll Quigley who was saying this, but he said he boldly admitted in his Tragedy and Hope, which was written in 1966, that A, the multitudes were already under the control of a small but powerful group bent on world domination, and B, Quigley himself was part of that group. Now, what does that mean? Carroll Quigley was a Jesuit, okay? He was a Jesuit professor at Georgetown University, and he was one of Bill Clinton's professors. So he was saying that the whole world was under the control of a small group of men, and he was part of that group. He was a Jesuit, okay? So what he was saying is here that the Jesuits are the ones who are ruling the world. And this is the logo of the Society of Jesus with IHS in the middle. The IHS stands for Isis Horus Set, okay? And it's in the form of the sun, which shows that the Jesuits worship the sun, okay, and they'll promote sun worship all over the world. Here it says from the Chicago Tribune, Archbishop Quigley said in 1903, when the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Matthew 24:33, so likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Yeah, so many of the things that are written in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, I would say maybe perhaps chapter 13 is actually my favorite chapter, but I also like chapter 17 and chapter 18 as well, because it kind of opens our eyes to what's really happening behind the scenes in the world. We're not supposed to take things on face value and believe what the media says. The media is actually involved in the whole conspiracy to deceive us. So I think that was the last slide from this PowerPoint. Thanks for watching the video. I hope everything I said made sense. And if you have any questions, put them in the comment section. And once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.